There is an epidemic happening in men today. Weakness and comfort has taken place of strength and purpose. Masculinity is labeled as toxic, and women are now the ones who define what a man is, more than men are. Weak fathers are raising lost boys who are at risk of never being initiated into manhood. We've grown farther and farther from God, which led us to become weaker and weaker. The man within fights back by introducing men to their true strength and purpose through God. So join me, and together we can restore true strength and purpose in men. Hey guys, welcome back to the Man Within podcast. So excited to have you here with us today in honor of Father's Day being tomorrow. Today we're going to talk about our fathers, relationships with the father, the role of our father, and hopefully building a better relationship with our father so we can break any generational cycle we have and go on to be the best fathers that we can be. Now, the relationship that a son has with his father is one of the most profound and one of the most impactful relationships a man can have. It shapes our beliefs about life. It shapes our internal belief system. It shapes a lot of our behavior. It shapes a lot of our direction in life, and mainly it shapes our definition of manhood. It shapes our definition of masculinity. So whether whether a father was present or not present, whether he was the best father in the world or maybe just a lazy father, whatever it is, whoever that man was, however he acted, that son gets a lot of his behavior, a lot of his definition of manhood from that. Meaning, if a father was absent or abusive, his definition of manhood could be very similar to that. It's, oh, masculinity is just this very hardcore, mean thing. It leaves you with this feeling of abandonment. It leaves you with this feeling of you're not good enough. Likewise, if you had a submissive father, if you had one that was weak, if you lived in a household where the mom wore the pants in the family, your idea of masculinity is also submissive. Your idea of masculinity is femininity. And really, it's become more of a rejection of masculinity. And all of these things, whether your father was overbearing, whether he was the greatest father, whether he was lazy, whether he was absent, whether he was present, all of these things we take with us as we become adults. And it isn't until we become an adult that we feel some of those effects, and particularly some of those negative effects. So what happens is we carry these thoughts with us, these behaviors, these beliefs, and we start to get some negative effects from it. And these negative effects lead to a lot of resentment. So there's two paths that sons generally take in regards to a relationship with his fathers. One, he wants to be just like him, or number two, he wants to be the exact opposite. But in either case, what we stop to do is become our own person. We're either identifying ourselves with wanting to be just like this other person, or our identity is fully dependent on being not what that person is. And what we fail to do is meet somewhere in the middle where we take all of the good characteristics of our father, we take the good characteristics of things we've learned in our life, and we start to develop our own identity. But when we identify ourselves with who we want to be versus who we don't want to be, we become a version of ourselves that is not us. So in other words, we're punishing ourselves for the actions of others. And this is where this generational cycle comes into play. You've probably heard someone talk about breaking the cycle, even me, breaking this generational cycle. Well, what is that? What is that generational cycle? Well, that cycle is what happens when you go from one extreme to the other, whether your father was weak and submissive or he was overbearing, whether he had something you liked, whether he had a lot that you didn't like. What happens is we tend to go from one extreme to the other, but all the while failing to understand we need to be ourselves. We need to have our own identity. We need to meet somewhere in the middle, gather those good characteristics, maybe get rid of some of those bad characteristics, and find out who we are to our core and live our lives according to the identity that God has given us. And I understand it's really, really difficult. This is going to be a rather deep episode, but what I want to encourage you to do as I'm going through some of these things that we're going to be talking through and learning about. What I want you to do is not just allow yourself to get emotional, not just allow yourself to get angry, because look, I understand there's a lot of resentment, especially as a man, that comes from the relationship with our fathers. So if I touch on something, if I hit a nerve, don't just sit there and let yourself be angry. Look at yourself in third person. Understand what it is about you. Why are you getting that emotion? Why does it bring up sadness or anger or resentment? What is that belief that's coming from you? What sort of relationship impacted that belief? I just want you to look at everything in third person and understand that your father is a human, and your father had a father, and the relationship with his father impacted his behavior in a lot of ways. And he may not have done the work on himself, but you're here listening now. You can be the change. You can break that generational cycle. You can be a role model for him. And even though they might not have learned this stuff, even though they haven't put that work in, you're here now. You're learning it. You can break that cycle and you can carry on something much better, a much better example of fatherhood for your kids and generations to come. So, with all that being said, point of this episode is to do three things. Today, we're going to remove some of that resentment to help you, your relationship with yourself, and the relationship with your father. And I want you to understand that your relationship with your father, all of this behavior, all of these beliefs, all of these identities that you've carried with you because of that relationship, when you improve it, you improve everything around you. You improve his relationships with the people around him. You improve the relationships with the people around you. And now you're acting as a role model for your children to follow you and for others to be role models in their families and break their own generational cycles. Now, the second thing, I want to help break this generational cycle by defining the role of a father according to God. There's a lot of roles, there's a lot of responsibility that a father has according to God in the Bible. I'm just going to touch on four of them today, but really understanding the role of a father will really help you understand maybe some of those things that your father did right, and it will also help you understand where some of those behaviors, some of those beliefs may have developed because you may have been lacking support in some areas. And lastly, together, we're going to take that difficult first step towards forgiveness, forgiving yourself, forgiving your father. That forgiveness is the first step to freedom. And I understand it's a very difficult thing, but this path we're on, this life, these battles we have to fight, they're very painful. But the prerequisite for growth, greatness, anything of value is a little pain and discomfort. But together, we're going to get through it. And by the end of this, you will want to reconcile the relationship with yourself, with your father, and you will want to go on to break that generational cycle and be the best father that you can be. So, all that being said, let's get into the role of a father. I've got four key roles of a father according to God. And we're going to start off with a father is present. Proverbs 14:26 tells us, whoever fears the Lord has a secure fortress, and for their children it will be a refuge. The presence of a father can say a multitude of things. The fear of the Lord, or the Almighty, the perfect Father, is like a secure fortress. Just having him be there can make you feel secure and safe. His presence, his desire to be there, can make you feel like you are his. His presence says, you are mine. I want you in my life. You are of my blood, and you are very important to me. And it also says, you are worth the sacrifice. A father has a lot of responsibility to protect and provide for his family. Just by being there, it says you are worth the sacrifice. You are worth more than any painful events in this life. Just the presence of a father alone can do so many great things for his son. It can help him emotionally. It can help him with his self-identity. It can help him with his belief. But it's just being there alone that tells him that you are worth something. You are worthy. You're worthy of love and protection. But when a father is absent, it can be a very demoralizing thing. It can be a very diminishing feeling. Absent father can diminish the identity and harm the emotional control of his son. Just as a present father makes his kids feel safe, feels like they are his, and it makes them feel as though they are worth the sacrifice. And Absent father can do quite the opposite. An absent father can make us feel unsafe, unsure, unworthy. We're not worth his time. We're not worth the sacrifice. We're not worth the protection. And this leads to a lot of very damaging, lifelong negative effects. It leads to us not being able to understand, decipher, control our emotions. It leads to us having negative beliefs. It leads to us having poor behavior. And what an absent father does is it leaves us to understand masculinity on our own. So without a father being at home, without a good masculine figure, we're left to figure it out on our own. And when the father is absent, or at least just not fully present, boys will end up searching for masculinity in all the wrong places. They're going to be getting it from movies or TV shows. They're going to be getting it from other kids in school. A lot of times they'll end up joining something that's very dangerous, like a gang. It gives them a sense of belonging. And they feel like the definition of masculinity is just destruction and chaos. Whereas another one might follow this feminist culture and completely try to reject their masculinity. So they live a lot of their lives hating men, hating anything to do with masculinity, denying themselves, and end up living with the negative effects of denying their identity, denying anything to do with masculinity. They're very submissive. They can't stand up for themselves. They don't have any confidence. It's hard for them to relate with anyone. And all of this stems from the absence of a father. They don't feel safe. They don't feel like they belong to anyone. They don't feel like they're worth the sacrifice. So it's not just being physically present, it's also being involved in their life. It's saying, hey, I'm taking an interest in you. You are worth my time. You are my blood. It's very important for me to spend a lot of time with you because I see the good in you and I want the world to experience more of that. One of the most motivational feelings that a man can get is the presence and just the overall approval of his father. I want you to understand that one of our basic human needs, one of the very first, is just love and belonging. After food, water, shelter, it's love and belonging. And when we don't feel loved, when we don't feel like we belong, like I said, we're going to look for it in all the wrong places. Our identity is going to become something that's not us. So if we don't get that feeling of love, if we don't get that feeling of approval, if our father doesn't even want to be present around us, if he doesn't want to be involved in our life at all, it's hard for us to feel validated, hard for us to feel loved. And if we don't get past that very basic level of love and belonging, we don't know what to identify as. We don't know who to identify as. And it's hard for us to get to that next step. And the longer we delay some of those basic needs, the longer it's going to be before we get on our next step, which is that path to purpose, that path to fulfillment, the path to our calling, the identity that God has given us, meaning the whole purpose and the whole point of our life. So the presence of the Father can be a very powerful thing. With it, we feel like we are safe, feels like we are worthy, and a good father gives us a good representation of masculinity and manhood to help shape us and our identity as we become men and ourselves. But without the presence or involvement of a father, we're going to look for that love, that belonging, that identity in a place that is not good for us. And we'll either reject masculinity altogether and feel the negative effects and consequences of that, or we'll have a warped definition of masculinity, cause destruction, cause pain in the lives of others, and eventually get ourselves to a very painful place in our own lives. So, number one, a father is present. And I just want to add that he is also involved. Next, number two, a father encourages. Encouragement is a very powerful and a validating tool to move us forward. And when we get encouragement from our Father, it lifts our spirit. It gives us that validation. It gives us that approval and that love that we're looking for. But it also shows us that He believes in us. So I have this verse here, 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 11 and 12. Paul writes, "For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live the lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory." So we are encouraged by our fathers. I just want to say that encouragement is not always a very pretty thing, especially when it comes from our Father. The encouragement we get from our Father is what prepares us for the very painful and uncomfortable things that we are going to endure. Now, encouragement is very important, especially when we're young, because we haven't unleashed the beast factor yet. We haven't gotten that drive yet, and we haven't really experienced that calling, that full masculine energy, that full masculine essence that pushes us through those painful and difficult things. So it's very important to have that masculine encouragement, especially when we're young, to help lead us and guide us through that journey. The reason encouragement is so important from a father to a son in particular is because a father, only a man understands the journey that another man is going to go through. Only a man is going to understand the battles that await him, that great weight of responsibility, the weight of protecting and providing. So encouragement from a father is really just leading him and preparing him because the father has been through it. Part of being a father and an encourager is being a teacher, meaning you have gone through the things, you understand it, you're leading your son and preparing him for these battles that are inevitably waiting for him. And it's good to get encouragement from your mother as well, but only a father truly understands the weight, the responsibility, the burden that comes with being a man. There are some battles in life that only a man will face. So we have to be fully equipped before we get out into the world. And it starts when we're at the age when we're ready to leave our mothers. There's a point in everyone's life, but especially a boy's life, when he's ready to start growing up, he's starting to experience that masculinity, he's ready to separate himself from the comfort of his mother and start to experience more risk. He wants to take on the world. He wants to take on battles. He wants to go on an adventure. Maybe he wants to do some more dangerous things. He just wants to explore. And it's all very chaotic. But this is where the father steps in. He says, I'm going to guide you. We're going to utilize all of this masculine energy that you have, and we're going to use it for good. We're going to use it to help you grow. And I'm going to encourage you. But the way that I, as your father, am going to encourage you is I'm going to push you through discomfort. I'm going to push you through things that you didn't think that you can do. Part of encouraging, part of the role of a father is knowing what a man is capable of. So when he encourages, his form of encouragement, the father to the son, is pushing him through things that only he as a man knows that his son is capable of, because the son doesn't yet know what he's capable of. He hasn't experienced the full power of his masculinity. He hasn't experienced the truth. So a loving father, one of the most loving things a father does when he encourages is an encouraging father instills the belief in ourselves by letting us fail. And after we fail, making us get back up. In life, we are going to fail. That is how we grow. But we can't just sit there and let the world roll over us and not get back up. The Bible says if we fall 7 times, we get up 8, meaning a man can and will fail, but he better not quit. The world is not a very nice and not a very forgiving place. We need to be strong. We need to be ready to fail, but we need to know what happens, what we need to do after we fail, which is to get back up. And that right there really is the essence of masculinity, because the essence of masculinity is fighting for what you believe in against all costs. And if you're a father, it means you have a wife and you have kids. If you get knocked down, you got to get back up and make sure you're able to protect and provide for that family. If you have a business and you have employees and you take a hit, you better make sure that you are doing right by them. If you're a leader in some capacity, which if you are a man, you were born to lead. But if you're leading in some sort of capacity and whatever organization you're leading takes a hit, you cannot lay down and show weakness. You have to be a role model for the people you're leading, meaning whatever pain or battle the world is going to throw at you, you have to be a leader and show them that you have the power of God behind you. And God gave you that masculine spirit that says, I do not quit, and neither should you. Because part of being a leader is leading the next one in line to be even better than you. And that's what an encouraging father does. An encouraging father is one of the best teachers for life, because a father was once a boy who left his mother and embarked on his own journey. He had to figure out a lot of things on his own. And it's expected that we, especially as men, go out, try, and fail and get right back up and get back on that journey because God did not give us a spirit of fear. He gave us a spirit of courage and masculinity, that warrior spirit. And God also instilled a spirit of mentorship in men for that very reason, that we help the next man in line embark on his own journey. And that's one of the biggest roles of a father, is to help prepare us for our own journey after we leave the mother, after we leave our home. Because if you think about it, for the vast majority of our life, we're not going to have our father holding our hand, showing us exactly where to go and what to do. But an encouraging father shows us how to navigate these things. He doesn't have to live the exact same experiences as you for him to at least give you the lessons you need to get through those things. Now, when a father does not encourage, a lack of encouragement shows a lack of faith. If you don't believe in your children, neither will they. A father who doesn't encourage his children either doesn't believe in himself or he doesn't believe in his children, or maybe it's even a combination of both. But the boy does not understand that. The boy sees it as, I'm not even worth being encouraged because my father has no belief in me. He doesn't truly believe that I can do it. It's just like when the coach is extra hard on that one kid in the football team. Well, it's because the coach believes in that one kid more than anyone else. And after a while, everyone knows that. So if the coach is being hard on one kid, or if the father is not being hard on you or encouraging you in the way that a father does, the boy sees it as he's not worth his father's time. The father doesn't believe in him. And because of that, the boy does not believe in himself. And we've already covered what happens when the boy doesn't believe in himself. If he doesn't believe in himself, he's going to believe in a different version of him, a new identity that's not him, which is very destructive. So a father encourages by letting his son fail and making him get back up. All right, number 3, a father disciplines his children. Proverbs 13:24 tells us, he who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Isn't it funny how it says if you spare the rod, you actually hate your son? And one who loves his son is quick to discipline him. He's diligent in his discipline. That seems a little counterintuitive because we have it in our mind, especially today, that discipline is very cruel. And the parents who discipline their children, they're the ones who are the problem. Not whatever action the children did. It's the parents who are at fault because their reaction to their kid doing something that was obviously wrong was just way overreacted. And it's just way too cruel. And you're going to mess your kid up for life. Now, look, I understand there's a big difference between discipline and abuse, but here we're strictly talking about discipline. And I have it defined as discipline really is just getting you back on the right track. Just as encouragement isn't always pretty, especially when it comes from a father, discipline isn't always ugly. In fact, discipline is one of the most difficult, but also one of the most loving things that a father must do. A father knows that you are going to face a lot of difficulties, a lot of battles, so he has a pretty good idea of the path that lays ahead. And the only father that knows exactly the path that lays ahead is God the Father, the perfect Father. So when God disciplines us, he's getting us back on track. When our earthly fathers discipline us, they're getting us fit. They're making us fit for society. They're making us fit for the path and the battles and getting us fully equipped and prepared to get on that path and stay on that path. Discipline is just a lesson in knowing that what we are doing is wrong. If we're not disciplined and we embark on our own journey and we go on our own path, and we inevitably get off that path because we're human and that's what we're going to do. But if we get off that path and we haven't learned that lesson that we get from discipline, we're not going to think that what we're doing is wrong. We're going to think that everyone else around us is wrong. It's, oh, I'm on the right path. And, I was just doing the thing that I wanted to do. And this negative thing happened to me. So it must be someone else's fault. Well, the person that thinks that way, they only think that way because they haven't received the loving form of discipline. They haven't received that lesson to tell them what you are doing is wrong. Now, a good father is able to discipline because, like I said, he's been to some extent on that path. He's a man. His son is growing up to be a man. He has a pretty good idea what awaits him. He knows the lessons that he needs. A father knows that we are going to get off the path. We are going to fail inevitably, as humans do. And a good father knows which paths generally lead to good, to growth and prosperity, and which paths lead to something bad. And there's a big difference between failing, getting off the path, and just complete self-sabotage. A good father who disciplines, a father who's been on his own journey and knows the difference between those paths that are good and bad, also knows which paths his son can fully handle and which paths he does not need to go on, the paths that he cannot handle, the paths that are only going to lead to regression. Just like God will not give us a battle we cannot handle on our own, a good father, when he disciplines, he does it to protect us from things that we can't handle on our own, things that are going to hurt us and those around us in the long run. For example, if a son wants to open a business, the father might fully allow him to do that, even though it's a very difficult thing, even though he knows there's a good likelihood that he fails, because he knows that if he fails trying a business, at the end, at least he grew. He grew in knowledge, and he can take what he's learned to go on and try it again, and this time prosper. But if his son wants to go hang out with the wrong crowd, meaning a crowd that gets into some things that they shouldn't be doing, the father might step in, exert a little bit more discipline, and not allow his son to do that, because he knows the end of that road, there's no growth, it's only regression. And the path to a bad road generally leads back to a place that's worse than where you started. So a big part of being a father and a disciplinarian is being able to distinguish between the paths that's safe for your son to take and the ones that are unsafe, the ones that he should completely avoid. So you, as a good father, as a disciplinarian, need to cut off that path before it even starts. And the last thing I want to say about discipline is that the father must be the disciplinarian. The father needs to be the disciplinarian because discipline is the most masculine form of love. A son needs to fear his father the way that we fear the Lord. We know that if we are disobedient to God, he is going to discipline us. Something in our life is going to hurt. It's not going to kill us, but it's going to be really uncomfortable. And it's going to be enough of a deterrent that we don't want to be disobedient anymore. And it's a kind of fear and a kind of love that tells us that he truly wants the best for us. Because without discipline, we send our kids out in a world that they're not fully prepared for, which is one of the most unloving things that we can do, is throw someone into something that they're not fully equipped to handle on their own. Discipline needs to come from a father because it's a masculine form of love, and the boy needs to understand that discipline comes from a place of strength. You're not going to fear something that's not stronger than you. Your mother is not physically stronger than you. If a father's not disciplining, the mother steps in and it's very unnatural for her. It messes up her way of being, and it messes up the child's identity and definition of masculinity. And that child loses disrespect for the father, maybe both parents even. And deep down, subconsciously, he might not feel the love that he needs to be getting from you, because he might be seeing his friends and their fathers disciplining them. And meanwhile, his own father is dismissive. So it's very important that a father specifically disciplines, because discipline is getting your son fit for society, getting him fit for survival, giving him the lessons he needs to find that path, to stay on that path. And a father who doesn't discipline his children can subconsciously tell his son that he doesn't believe in them either. And maybe he believes that his son will never have what it takes to start his own journey. And if his father doesn't believe in him, neither will the son. And role number 4, the last one I'm going to cover, is that a father prepares his son. We've talked about how a father helps prepare his son for all the battles of the world, but what I'm talking about here is that a father prepares his son to get on the path that God has laid out for him specifically. There's a lot of pain and suffering and discomfort and heartache that awaits the righteous man who wants to live a godly life. So a father prepares his son for all of that, and he leads him to Christ. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. The main purpose of a father, through presence, through encouragement, through discipline, is to lead and prepare his children for that godly journey that he must embark on. His son needs to leave the house. His son needs to face this difficulty. His son needs to get on his own journey. His son needs to have his own relationship with God, get on his own purpose, pursue his own calling, because that's what we as men were called to do. And the main purpose of a father is to teach his son that and to lead him towards that. And he does this through being present with his son and involved in his life. He does this through encouraging his son, letting him know that he's validated, that you as his father approve of him. You want more of your son. And he also does this through disciplining him, teaching him, letting him know that you are worth something. You are worth being disciplined. You are my son. I see way more in you than maybe even you see yourself. And I want you to experience the full power, the full joy, the fulfillment that you get from embracing that masculinity that comes within you, that awesome, amazing gift that God has given you. I want you to experience that. I want to see what you can do. I want you to be even better than me, a better man than I was as your father, because I know I'm human. I know I'm not perfect, but I've learned a lot of things. I want to bestow this onto you. You are worth learning these things. You are worth so much, and the world needs to see that. The world needs to experience that. And I know that giving you these great tools, these great lessons, you're going to take them and be a 10 times better man than I was. So, as a father, he teaches his son the truth and he prepares him for all of the pain that comes with it. His father is a role model. He lives the Christian life. He prays, he goes to church. He is a husband. He protects, provides, he works, he teaches, he mentors, he leads, and he's brave. And only a father knows the battles that his son is going to face. There's a lot of strength, but there's also a lot of responsibility that comes with a man. It can be a burden or it can be a blessing. And one of the biggest determining factors of whether or not that strength and that responsibility that comes with being a man is either a burden or a blessing is the relationship a son has with his father. If a father is distant, dismissive, or abusive, that son can go on to feel like he's just a heavy burden on his father. He, as his son, wasn't a gift to his father. He feels more like a mistake. And it's because the way his father acts is in a way that says, I want less of you in my life, not more. But the father who views him as a blessing will do all of these things with him. He'll be involved in his life. He'll discipline his son. He'll encourage him. And he'll prepare him for the most difficult thing there is to do, which is to stay on, well, first of all, to find that relationship with God, to find that purpose, to understand that calling, to get on that path and fully commit to it. Because I know the world and most people of this world are going to try to lead you astray. Most of the time, living a godly life is going to be very uncomfortable. It's going to be the last thing that we want to do. But a big role as a father is preparing his son for that, teaching him, making him understand all the pain and suffering that actually comes from being disobedient. It's teaching his son that God loves humble beginnings and he loves delayed gratification. God's formula for greatness is short-term pain for long-term pleasure. But there's going to be a lot of distractions in your life. There's going to be a lot of people living a worldly life, storing up their riches on earth and not storing up their riches in heaven. But you, as my son, you're going to be a role model. You're going to experience the greatness and the fulfillment that comes with pursuing a godly life. And one of the ways that a father does this is that he introduces pain in a controlled manner to his son, meaning he doesn't give him something he can't handle, but he introduces something that is going to be very realistic. It gives him the opportunity to learn how to navigate it on his own. And the lesson from that is that if he can handle a little, he can learn, go on to the next, grow and grow and grow, and eventually he'll be able to handle a lot. And it's that winning thought process that his father instills in his son. It's that thought process that prepares him for the life and the journey to come. And a father is a leader who inspires his son to one day also be a leader, because his son will need to forge his own path. So a father prepares his son by leading. A leader is someone who inspires others to lead. Well, one day his son will need to forge his own path. His son will need to get on his own journey. And his own journey includes leading his son to be a leader in his life. So a father's main purpose is to prepare his son for the pain and the discomfort and the battles that come with living a godly life on earth. So now that we've covered the role of a father, I'm sure that some old emotions, maybe some resentment, came out of that. So now I just want to talk about your relationship with your father personally. So I've got a few questions that I really want you to think about. I want you to think about your father and his relationship with his father. How did your father act? What was your father's relationship with his father? How did that impact your father's beliefs? And how did your father's beliefs that stemmed from his relationship with his father impact the way that he lived? What I want you to do here is to humanize your father. Understand that he's a human and his beliefs and his behaviors all stemmed from something that was very impactful, especially the relationship that he had with his father. Now, after you've taken a few minutes of doing that, I want you to think about yourself. What are your beliefs? What was your relationship like with your father? And how did your beliefs that stem from your relationship with your father impact you? How did they impact your life? And what sort of things that you have in your life have you been blaming your father for? And to take a step back, what sort of things do you think your father blamed his father for that he never worked through? Now, looking back on this generational cycle, which side is your father on? Which side are you on? Did your father want to be more like his father, or was he trying to be the exact opposite? Are you trying to be more like your father, or are you trying to be the exact opposite? Now, from this point, I want you to think about the middle ground, the place where you want to be. Think about all the good characteristics of a good man, of a good father. Where are you at on this scale? And how has the resentment of your own father pushed you away from the place where you want to be? Take a second to look at any and all of the good characteristics that your father has. Now, this part is very difficult. It's difficult because we have a lot of resentment, we have a lot of anger. But anger and resentment is punishing yourself for the actions of others. This step is very difficult because it's the first step to change. It's the first step to freedom. This step is very difficult because up until now, we have not been able to humanize our father. We haven't been able to take a step back and see life from his point of view. We haven't looked at his relationship with his father and how that may have impacted him. So anything that he's done to you, it's done in large part because of the beliefs that he had that came from the relationship with his father, or the beliefs that he had that came from the world, meaning other people who had low beliefs in themselves. So it's just an accumulation of getting these beliefs from other people who don't believe in themselves. It's an accumulation of this generational cycle. And he's been living with all of this pain and anger and resentment. And now he's projected it onto you. And it's completely understandable that you can be very angry with your father. I've been there. I've come from a place where I had a lot of resentment for a really long time, but I'm telling you, this exercise, thinking about him in third person, thinking about the relationship he had with his father, thinking about his beliefs and how they impacted his life, and humanizing him, and finally forgiving him for being a human. It's one of the most difficult things because what it requires is accountability. It requires a lot of self accountability. Up until now, you have been blaming someone else for everything you have in your life. But I want to give you this little life lesson. It may not have been your fault, but it is your responsibility to change it. Now, this is a very difficult thing because I'm telling you, anything that has any value is difficult. The prerequisite for growth, the prerequisite for greatness, the prerequisite for the life that you want, that fulfillment, that joy, that purpose, that calling that comes from God, the prerequisite for all of that is some pain and discomfort, as nothing is more painful than stripping yourself of an identity. Because up until now, this is how you have viewed the world. This was your identity. This is how you lived life. But if you now forgive, what's happening is you're getting rid of all of the blaming, all of the excuses, this negative identity that you have in yourself. You're killing off that identity that is not you. That is very painful. But I'm telling you, you can do it and you must do it because it's the only way to break that cycle. In order to break that generational cycle, in order to break any cycle, you have to do something different. And in this case, you have to do something that your father and his father were not willing to do. You have to step in and be that role model. You now have the opportunity to step up, be that role model, and be that leader that you needed to be. Now have what you need to break that cycle. And you must break it for you. You must break it for him, and you must break it for your children. Because guess what? Fatherhood starts way before having children. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something from it. I hope you have a great Father's Day. And as always, if you got any value from this, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if there's another topic you want to touch on. Again, happy Father's Day. Happy Sunday to you. And I'll see you on the next one.